New university education opportunities for students and people with working experience. The launch of the Shenzhou 17 mission. And a brief ground raid into northern Gaza by Israeli forces. Good evening and welcome to TVB News. Chief Executive John Lee announced in his policy address yesterday that the government will support appropriate self-financing institutions to develop into universities of applied sciences. Sources say details will be announced next year.
Good grades in core subjects in university entrance exams are important for gaining admission to universities. For candidates who underperformed in core subjects such as languages, they may fail to get in one of the 8 universities funded by the University Grants Committee. But in future, they may still have a chance to enter a university here in Hong Kong. The latest policy address revealed the government is working on the development of universities of applied sciences, which mainly offer career-oriented training. Together with the Hong Kong Council for Accreditation of Academic and Vocational Qualifications, authorities will draw up the criteria for institutions to qualify as universities of applied sciences or UAS in terms of both admission and curriculum. Sources say at the initial stage, in addition to diploma of secondary education candidates, higher diploma graduates and those with relevant working experience will also be considered for admission. Currently, several institutions offer applied sciences courses. That includes the Caritas Institute of Higher Education, Tonghua College, and the Technological and Higher Education Institute. It's believed these institutions must first be upgraded to university status in order to apply to become a university of applied sciences. Authorities reportedly hope the move will change some people's negative perception of vocational training. Paul Lam, president of the Hong Kong Metropolitan University, said institutions that aspire to be one of the UAS should first communicate with relevant sectors before designing the curriculum. That should include what qualities they are looking for in graduates. Meanwhile, Victor Kwok, an assistant research director at our Hong Kong Foundation, said UAS and traditional universities enjoy similar recognition overseas, and UAS graduates' salaries are similar to those of universities. He added the city's government should take the lead in hiring UAS graduates.
The policy address said the government will optimize the use of existing land to unleash its development potential. That includes revitalizing Hong Kong Station and nearby sites for land development. With Hong Kong status as an interchange station and the high-speed rail replacing intercity through trains, some land surveyors said they believe Hong Kong Station is suitable for new commercial and residential projects. Timothy Lee tells us more.
Completed in 1975, Hung Hom Station was once the terminus of the Kowloon Canton Railway. However, the Hung Hom Immigration Control Point located inside the station has remained closed since the start of the pandemic. The station now serves as an interchange station for the Tuen Ma and East Rail lines, with platforms now located underground. In the latest policy address, the government suggested revitalizing Hung Hom Station and nearby areas for land development use, including the waterfront and pier facilities south of the Hong Kong Coliseum. Authorities have hired land surveyors to conduct preliminary inspections of the area to outline which facilities near the station are suitable for construction. This woman said it would be nice to include facilities for those who exercise, given the amount of people who regularly jog in the area. Currently, a hotel, a shopping mall, and some service apartments are located next to the interchange station. Hong Kong Institute of Surveyors General Council member Lau Chun Kong suggested the land development scheme could focus on further bridging between East Tsim Sha Tsui and Hung Hom. The government noted it will look into improving the pedestrian connections between Hung Hom and East Tsim Sha Tsui, as well as the waiting area at the Hung Hom Station Public Transport Interchange. A research team from the Hong Kong Polytechnic University earlier suggested implementing a green deck design and building food and drinks facilities near the Cross Harbour Tunnel Toll Plaza. Timothy Lee, TVB News.
In the policy address, authorities have put on hold a plan to build the sandy-rich columbarium next to the Shenzhen border. They will instead use the land for innovation purposes. The chief executive said the decision was made because of already sufficient facilities to house ashes. Several lawmakers said they believe authorities should quickly provide a layout for the plan to build innovation-based facilities such as data centers because a steady supply of electricity and water will be needed. The previous administration's decision to build the columbarium at the SAR mainland border was met with objections from local and Shenzhen residents. Chief Executive John Lee was at the Legislative Council today for a Q&A session with lawmakers on the policy address. He said what's written on the blueprint will be done. That includes projects that have been studied for a long time, such as the mass transit system in East Kowloon and Kai Tak.
One day after Chief Executive John Lee delivered his policy blueprint for the city, lawmakers had the opportunity to ask questions this morning. Some are concerned about any progress in building a green mass transit in East Kowloon and Kai Tak.
Finally, after all the study, you have embarked on this project. Many residents in East Kowloon and Kai Tak want to know exactly when the mass transit system will be in place. They are afraid that you will be doing more studies and they have to wait longer. We need to do some comparisons. For instance, are there interested bidders and what are their proposals? There have been various changes, but now we've decided to go ahead with it. It's included in the policy address, and I am result-driven.
Some lawmakers are concerned that many residents are troubled by an increase in phone scams as well as suspected fraud involving a cryptocurrency platform.
This affects the well-being of our citizens. The police have been working hard to conduct the investigations. However, in light of the large number of victims, I wonder if the chief executive have any measures in place to help these victims and prevent these frauds. We will hold the criminals accountable, and we will stand with the victims. That means the devils are the ones who swindle money from people.
Lee added scam phone calls have been a trend around the world. He said the Security Bureau and the police would hold seminars and invite the Interpol and mainland authorities to discuss solutions on how to tackle and prevent these scams.
The Shenzhou 17 manned spaceship successfully blasted into orbit as 3 taikonauts begin a 6-month mission. The rocket carrying the spaceship was ignited at 11:14 this morning. The 3-man crew are all former Air Force pilots. They are the youngest team China has sent into space. The commander, Tang Hongbo, is 48. His colleagues Tang Shengjie and Jiang Xinlin are in their 30s. They will travel to China's Tiangong space station and replace another crew and carry out experiments. After 10 minutes, the spacecraft separated from a Long March 2F carrier rocket. The director of the launch center declared it a complete success. Elsewhere, Israeli troops and tanks launched a brief ground raid into northern Gaza earlier today, striking several Hamas targets. Israel is preparing for a full-scale ground assault in retaliation for Hamas attacks on October 7th. Some medical aid has reached several hospitals in Gaza, but UN agencies say a lack of fuel will curtail relief efforts. Meanwhile, U.S. President Joe Biden said a 2-state solution is the only way to ensure peace between Israelis and Palestinians. Nasvi Karim has more.
Israeli tanks rumble into Gaza. But this is not the ground assault that Israel has promised. It's one of several short incursions by Israeli forces into Gaza territory, paving the way for an expected ground attack aimed at crippling Hamas and its ability to govern the enclave. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said his forces were ready for the offensive, but declined to say when it will start. This, as the Wall Street Journal says, Israel may be delaying its attack to allow time for the United States to deploy air defense systems in the region. The U.S. is concerned that an invasion would trigger attacks on U.S. troops stationed in the Middle East. Looking beyond the war, U.S. President Joe Biden said the only road to peace was a 2-state solution.
Israelis and Palestinians equally deserve to live side by side in safety, dignity, and peace. It also means that when this crisis is over, there has to be a vision of what comes next. And in our view, it has to be a 2-state solution. It means a concentrated effort from all the parties, Israelis, Palestinians, regional partners, global leaders, to put us on a path toward peace.
Biden also said he was alarmed by attacks on Palestinians in the West Bank by illegal Israeli settlers, insisting Palestinians are entitled to be there. He cast doubt on the number of people killed and injured by Israel airstrikes in Gaza, saying he has no confidence in Palestinian figures.
At the United Nations, China and Russia have vetoed a draft resolution sponsored by the United States on the Israel-Palestinian conflict. A second Russian-backed resolution failed to adopt after it garnered only 4 yes votes. Meanwhile, Israeli officials reacted angrily to remarks by UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres that Hamas attacks on October 7th did not happen in a vacuum. The U.S. resolution would have urged the UN Security Council to act on the conflict by calling for pauses in fighting to allow in humanitarian aid, as well as ensure the protection of civilians and to stop arming Hamas. China's ambassador to the UN, Zhang Jun, said the draft failed to reflect the world's call for a ceasefire. The Russian resolution would have called for an immediate humanitarian ceasefire while condemning Hamas' October 7th attacks and Israel's indiscriminate attacks on civilians in Gaza. Meanwhile, Israel officials cancelled meetings with Guterres and said they would refuse Israeli visas for UN representatives. They were outraged by the UN chief's previous speech, in which he highlighted decades of Palestinian suffering under Israeli occupation.
The UN is failing. The UN is failing, and you, Mr. Secretary General, have lost all morality and impartiality. Because when you say those terrible words that these heinous attacks did not happen in a vacuum, you are tolerating terrorism.
We had a meeting and lunch with the Secretary General, and we stand by him against these ridiculous attacks against him. He is the symbol of multilateralism. He is the symbol of the United Nations. He holds the moral power of being the leader of the United Nations as a Secretary General. He stood on principles.
Still ahead on tonight's news. A mass shooting incident in the U.S. state of Maine leaves at least 16 dead. Workers at Japan's Fukushima nuclear power plant splashed with radioactive liquid. And the return of the Wine and Dine Festival after a 5-year hiatus. Welcome back to TVB News. A manhunt is underway in Maine in the northeast of the United States after a mass shooting killed at least 16 people. Dozens more were wounded. The deadly rampage took place at a popular bar and bowling alley. Police are searching for the perpetrator. David Garrett reports.
Alarming scenes outside of Spare Time Recreation, a bowling alley about 6 kilometres away from a restaurant where the other shooting incident took place in Lewiston, Maine. People flee. A shooter had been firing an assault weapon inside. Police cars arrived, but the gunman had left. Authorities launched a manhunt. Victims were filmed being loaded into ambulances and quickly sent to hospital. This man was one of over 100 inside who spoke of a narrow escape.
There was a balloon. I had my back turned to the door. And as soon as I turned and saw it was not a balloon, he was holding a weapon, I just booked it down the lane, and I slid basically into where the pins are and climbed up in the machine and was on top of the machines for about 10 minutes until the cops got there.
This is the man police are saying is a person of interest. 40-year-old Robert Card, a trained firearms expert with some military training. Reports say he had treatment at a mental health facility in recent months. Roads across the state were closed off. Residents were told to stay inside. Police converged around the town of Lisbon, where Card's car was seen.
We have literally hundreds of police officers working around the state of Maine to investigate this case, to locate Mr. Card, who again is a person of interest and a person of interest only. And we'll continue to gather information so that we can bring the suspect to justice.
Maine is a state with a low murder rate with under 30 homicides in 2022. Schools are shut on Thursday. President Joe Biden has been briefed about the ongoing situation. Hospitals within a 50-kilometre radius continue to receive the injured. It is tense. Distressed families search for loved ones as helicopters circle overhead. David Garrett, TVB News.
The U.S. House of Representatives elected Republican Mike Johnson, a conservative with little leadership experience, as its Speaker on Wednesday. This came after a turbulent 3 weeks that left the leaderless chamber unable to respond to the Middle East crisis or carry out any of its basic duties. More in this report from NBC News.
After 3 chaotic and leaderless weeks, tonight the House once again has a Speaker.
The Speaker-elect, Mike Johnson from the state of Louisiana.
Louisiana Republican Mike Johnson elected on a party line vote with the support of every Republican, every Democrat opposed. A stunning rise for the Trump ally and low-ranking member of the GOP House leadership team, now second in line to the presidency.
The challenge before us is great, but the time for action is now.
Johnson is a staunch conservative on issues like abortion and government spending. He also played a key role in efforts by then-President Trump to overturn Joe Biden's electoral victory in the 2020 election. History noted by Democrats today.
Joe Biden won the 2020 presidential election. No amount of election denialism will ever change that reality.
Are you worried that a Speaker Johnson would again attempt to overturn the election?
No. Johnson's election caps a turbulent month for the House, beginning with the ouster of former Speaker Kevin McCarthy and the elevation and withdrawal of 3 other GOP nominees before the party settled on the relatively unknown Johnson late last night.
If you don't think that moving from Kevin McCarthy to MAGA Mike Johnson shows the ascendance of this movement and where the power in the Republican Party truly lies, then you're not paying attention.
The 8 Republicans who led the effort to remove McCarthy declaring victory.
The only way to change Washington is to change who's leading Washington, and that is what we did today.
Johnson jolting the chamber back into action.
I believe we're going to be able to get this team to work together.
With the House voting hours after his election on the first bill of any kind in nearly a month, a resolution supporting Israel, which passed with overwhelming bipartisan support.
In Japan, staff at the Fukushima nuclear power station were splashed with radioactive liquid, and 2 of them were taken to hospital for tests. 5 workers who were cleaning pipes used to transfer contaminated water came into contact with water or mist. They were wearing protective clothing, but the substance reached the skin of 4 of them. 2 were taken to hospital for decontamination treatment, but authorities said it was unlikely they suffered radiation burns. Japan's Ministry of Economy, Trade and Industry instructed TEPCO, the operator of the power plant, to take all possible measures to ensure safety. 12 years after the meltdown caused by a tsunami, treated radioactive water is processed before being dumped into the Pacific Ocean. This has caused some governments, including China and Russia, to ban Japanese seafood products. Back locally, the widow of a construction worker killed in last year's crane collapse at an Anderson Road housing site succumbed to cancer last week. The couple left behind 2 young daughters who are being taken care of by their grandfather. Family members now say the girls will stop accepting donations a day after they expressed a willingness to receive help from the public. The Association for the Rights of Industrial Accident Victims, which has been assisting the girls, said donations have been pouring in. They say the sum collected so far is enough to cope with short-term needs. The girls' aunt, their guardian, said the late mother of the girls had always been content with whatever they had. The aunt wishes to continue this spirit by urging the public to donate to others in need. The family initially declined donations but made a U-turn after finding out that the bank account of the girl's mother had been frozen following her death. The Hong Kong Wine and Dine Festival opened today at the Central Harbour Front after a 5-year hiatus. The 4-day event features about 300 stalls from 36 countries at a scale of about 80% of pre-pandemic festivals. New to the event are Finland and China wine areas. Visitors can sample food from many countries. There are also musical performances and workshops. Admission fees range from $20 to $40. Tickets and tasting passes are available online. That's the news. Thanks for watching.